You're listening to the podcast about little-known niche subcultures and hobbies that reintroduces you to your neighbors in Technicolor. I'm Leslie Thompson, and it's niche to meet you. Hey, Leslie here. Before I tell you the story of the Barkley, I wanted to let you know that this will be the last fully original Niche to Meet You episode until the fall. I'm taking the summer to focus on some other niche items. You can join the niche list to learn more. See the show notes. But do not panic. Don't fear. I've got some fun surprises up my sleeve for this feed in the coming months. So enjoy learning about the Barkley, and if you liked it, leave a review. I would love to hear from you. For some folks, running provides not just exercise, but mental health support. Just jogging around their neighborhood or on a greenway. Now, I'm told that this practice sometimes gives way to more formal running challenges. I wouldn't know. But some folks take up 5Ks, half marathons, full marathons. Amazing. But what if you want to run further? Longer than 26 miles. These are called Ultramarathons. And these are what I thought I was going to be telling you about in this episode. It's what I thought I was going to be witnessing when I drove into the mountains for a secret and exclusive running event in East Tennessee one cold March morning. But I was so wrong. It's about something completely different. This is a story about literature. It's about pain. It's about quests to achieve the unconquerable. And it's about a whale. A white whale. I'm Leslie. It's niche to meet you. And this is the Barkley. Now, when I say the white whale, I'm referring to none other than the villain, the antagonist, the cursed beast in Herman Melville's 1851 novel that bears its name, Moby Dick. It's a story about a tormented sea captain who helms a ship called the Pequod. His obsession with the whale who took his leg becomes a mirror to the human experience throughout the book. It's told from the perspective of one of the mates on the ship, whose name is Ishmael, a survivor of Ahab's demise, a witness to the power of legend and its ability to drive and change a person. And it's the same kind of power I witnessed in my time at the Barkley Marathons in March of 2025. And I'm not the only one.
I mentioned Moby Dick a couple of times in the book.
That's Jared Beasley, and he's a freelance writer I met at the Barkley. The book he mentions is coming out this fall. It's a biography about the race's founder. It's Captain Ahab, if you will, a guy named Lazarus Lake. We'll meet Laz toward the end of our story. His introduction will be delayed because I want you to meet the thing he's obsessed with before you meet him. Jared Beasley told me that comparing the Barkley to Moby Dick is a time-honored tradition. In fact, one of the most famous finishers, his name is John Kelly, you'll learn more about him too, has referred to it in his post-race writing.
He called it the White Whale of Tennessee. Definitely a lot of parallels to the Ahab figure, what you're seeing and then the unseen, and chasing something that you are not sure just might drag you under the waters, you know.
Melville writes of this white whale, "It cannot be much matter of surprise that some whalemen should go still further in their superstitions, declaring that Moby Dick not only ubiquitous, but immortal." Moby Dick is real, of course, even though throughout the whole book you're wondering if he's ever going to show up. But he's also a legend, a myth, with lore and battle scars and symbolism. And the same is true for the Barkley. Myth and mystery are core to its existence. For example, the dates of the race are kept secret from the public, but it's widely covered by major media once it starts, when a guy named Keith provides vague updates on Twitter that are retweeted and shared via screenshot by thousands upon thousands of people. Have you ever been trending on Twitter?
Oh, yeah. We were trending number 2 or 3 last year on Twitter. You know, the initial post, within 10 minutes, they had 20,000 views.
People are so compelled by the Barkley because it's more a legend than it is a race. Its mere existence is a metaphor. And stories that arise from it are told like the fisherman whose prized fish gets just an inch longer each time he regales you with the story of his catch. Moby Dick is an apt literary comparison tool for the Barkley. In so many ways, it's the perfect parallel. And yet, in so many other ways, it's in direct contrast. So in this episode, we'll use this novel as our guide through the story of the niche that is the Barkley. So hop on board and just call me Ishmael. Chapter 1. Loomings.
All the individualities of the crew, this man's valor, that man's fear, all varieties were welded into oneness, and how they still strove through that infinite blueness to seek out the thing that might destroy them.
As I mentioned, Ishmael is the narrator of the book Moby Dick. He arrives to town to attach himself to a whaling ship as a sailor. Now, he and I are alike in this way because when I want to experience a niche for this project, I don't want to go as a spectator. No, to quote Ishmael, I always go to sea as a sailor. So, just like him, I arrived on site to the Frozen Head State Park campgrounds for this event called the Barkley, an ultramarathon in the mountains of East Tennessee. And, just like him, I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I set up my tent and began to talk to folks to get my bearings. The first question I asked of anyone I met was simple, or so I thought.
There are ultras. What is this?
Easy question. The answer to this question always begins with a laugh and then like a non-answer. Something like,
This is an experience of suffering in the woods.
And it's true. The Barkley Trail is more about misery than it is about enjoyment or mental health. In fact, it's the opposite of why most folks run at all. Because most people who start the race will not finish it. And it's well known because of that fact. There's even a documentary, you can watch it on YouTube, called The Race That Eats Its Young. It goes into detail about every quirk and idiosyncrasy of this event, so I won't go into all of it here because I think there's more to the race that hasn't been covered by anyone before that, of course, is a story only Niche to Meet You can tell. Now, there are some important things you'll need to know on this adventure we'll undertake together. For example, you'll hear me say marathons plural. That's because the event is roughly 5 marathon-linked loops, back-to-back, completed within 60 hours, with cumulative elevation change 2.5 times that of Mount Everest. And the loops themselves? Well, the creator of the event claims they're 20 miles each, but
the loop has been 20 miles since 1986.
This is Tim Waz. He's a former runner, but for this event, he's on somebody's crew.
He adds to it every single year, but it's always been exactly 20 miles. It's always been 20 miles with, the same elevation change.
It must be the magic of the Barkley.
It's the magic of the Barkley.
Here's the second thing you need to know. On the trail, there are books. And in order to have fully completed a loop, runners have to find each book and pull the page number which they were assigned when they started that loop. This acts as checkpoints and proof. And finding these books aren't just like seeing a little library in your neighborhood. People quit because of how long it takes to find them. At home base, runners would regularly come in to quit, and they'd say something like,
"We were 6 hours in, we had 2 books in there. 2 pages.
6 hours for 2 pages. Each of these books are hand-selected with self-deprecating titles as a sort of insult to injury for the runners. So for example, one book on the loop this year was titled
Discipline and Punish.
That's Carl. He's been slowly taking over the race from the originator, our Captain Ahab. Carl is the second in command, like Stubb on Melville's Pickwad. He's putting this book at the back of the Brushy State Penitentiary, a point on the course. He's using duct tape to affix it to a metal pipe sticking out of the ground. It's the only book that's not hidden in brush.
It should be the easiest one for them to find.
The third thing you need to know is that there's no formal application to run the thing. You just have to figure it out. Here's Matt Cantrell. It's his second time running the Barkley.
There's ways, things to do to try to figure it out. And it's just, if you want to be here, you got to figure out how to do it.
And here's the last thing you need to know about the Barkley before we move on. Only 17 people have finished since 1986. That's because it takes a very particular and special set of skills to run the Barkley, Here's Tim.
Everybody that's in this race is a runner or a through hiker. So like the Appalachian Trail, hiking a certain distance and you sleep on the trail and then you wake up the next morning and then you hike again. So everybody's like still an athlete, but this is like its own beast. Every single race is so different.
Every single race is so different because the course is never the same from year to year, and it is never publicized. To quote Ishmael in Moby Dick, it is not down on any map. True places never are. Well, hold on, let me take that back. That's not totally true of the Barkley. Runners don't know the course before the race, yes, but they learn the course upon registration, where there's a single map with the course marked out, just laid out on a table.
There's one map, the master map, and you can sort of piece together from previous years and race reports where things might have been in the previous years, but I mean, it's usually every year something changes.
As the runners would see the map, they'd process out loud together. I'm about to play a clip from a moment just like this, but you're going to hear some bleeping, and I'll explain why later.
So we come down. No, the was back there. So up here. We're skipping the whole top. Ton of people are going to get lost here. Guarantee you. Guarantee you.
The locations are edited out because the organizers are very serious about keeping them under wraps. This is for a couple of reasons. In the early 2000s, the race was nearly shut down by the state's conservation board, who wanted to preserve the native species and were afraid that all the runners might harm them as they went through. So as a result, the organizers employ fail-safes to ensure there's as little foot traffic as possible. Like, for example, being intentional with participant selection, picking only a small number who may actually have a shot at finishing, and therefore lessening the amount of times the trail will be used. The organizers are also very serious not to let the course details be released so that non-participants won't attempt it themselves. Not just for the preservation of the native species, but also because it's so dangerous. Other folks shouldn't try it themselves. And the runners are also serious about this. In fact, my microphones completely terrified them. I had to promise that I would send this to the organizers for approval before posting. Because if the runners were caught sharing course details, they could be banned for life. It's serious. So once they see the map, many runners retreated to their tents immediately and studied it.
All right, time to go mark up a map. Ready? Yes, of course.
Matt related this cram session to his veterinary school experience.
You do your best to not be in the position of cramming. You study all along the way and stuff like that. But then when it comes down into that last that week, and especially the last 24 hours, you never feel like you're ready enough. And so you just keep cramming. I mean, I've looked at these maps and I've been here before. And so I feel like I know this area really, really well, but it's never going to feel like I know it enough.
And they have to cram because participants can only take their map with them on the trail. No GPS, no cell phones, just the map, and a race-commissioned wristwatch, purely for keeping time, which is perhaps the most foundational thing that sets the Barkley apart from all other ultramarathons.
A standard, normal ultra, you get rid of navigation, which is a huge component here.
This is Jody Issener. 2025 was his 8th year back at the campsite. He's a 6-time runner and a 2-time crew member for other runners.
You can't be just a good runner. You can't be just a good navigator. You need to have everything, and you need to be prepared in all areas.
Throughout the night, runners would begin to emerge from their tents. They had a little less excitement, maybe a little more dread on their faces, overwhelm, trepidation. And everyone started gathering around the campfire for a potluck dinner. The media was even encouraged to bring something too. We were told that everyone who's at the campsite is part of the Barkley. I brought brownies, and we dined together. Runners shared their findings from the map. Everyone else mingled in a still peaceful moment of community before the mind games began. When we would wait, in nervous anticipation for the 1-hour warning of the race start, signified by the blowing of a conch shell. Yes, a conch shell. And that's where we'll pick up after this break. Chapter 2. The Chase.
I know not all that may be coming, but be it what it will, I'll go to it laughing.
Among all the quirks of the Barkley, perhaps the most outstanding is that of the conch shell, the thing that warns the runners that the race will start in 1 hour. Now, no one knows exactly when the shell will be blown, only that it will happen between 11 p.m. on registration day and 11 a.m. the day after. So when you go to sleep that night, you sleep with one ear open. And that's what we did from our tent. Hours passed, and more hours passed, and this is all we heard. Hour after hour, all night long. As the dark of night gave way to sun rays, peeking through the canopy, everyone slowly made their way to the campfire that had been going all night long by the volunteers. We kept a close eye on Carl, the one who would be blowing the conch. Now, this is the second year he'll blow it, as it's usually done by the race's founder. We'll meet him later. His name is Gary Cantrell, no relation to Matt. And at 70, he's starting to pass more on to Carl. Last year, the blowing of the shell. This year, the placing of the book at the penitentiary. With Carl's each and every move, heads would turn and watch for the shell to emerge. Then, at 10:34, Carl stood up, grabbed the shell, walked to the yellow gate, and after 3 attempts, there was officially 1 hour until the commencement of the 2025 Barkley. There was a mass exodus. Everybody went to their campsites, changed, double-checked their supplies, and took one more good look at that map with their crew. At the same time, the organizers confer about the opening ceremonies.
And you're going to tell them that this is the best Barkley ever, and we know they all got well rested like we intended.
An hour later, we all found ourselves at the yellow gate. There were nerves, maybe even some tension was in the air. Very soon, the race would begin, but not without some pomp and circumstance. First, there was the basic housekeeping.
We've concurred that the best advice we can give you is leave your flashlight here to save weight and just run really fast so you're back before dark.
And then amid all the sarcasm, all the dry humor, all the chastising, there was a poignant moment when Carl read names of previous runners who've passed away.
Fred Brooks, Norm Carlson, John D. Wall.
Some of them are on the trail even now, as current runners take their cremated remains and spread them along the trail, taking them further than they ever got in life.
Keith Henry, Jim Nelson, Michael.
The Niche to Meet You podcast is proudly sponsored by the free daily news digest called 1440, which uses real reader stories for its Saturday Human Kindness section. Here's Editor-in-Chief Soni Kassem to tell us more.
And that was our first ever approach to creating a more community-centered section. So we ask our readers to submit stories of human kindness, things that they've witnessed or things that they've done. And we've collected about 5,000 stories over the last 3 years.
Go to nichetomeetyou.show/1440 to sign up now. Once all the names were read, a single trumpet played taps. Now, this is only the first of a great many times we'll hear this at the campground because it'll be repeated for every runner that quits. Then, the race's founder, it's Captain Ahab, took to the iconic yellow gate and he started the countdown.
10 seconds.
The race's official start is signified with, I'm not kidding, the lighting of a cigarette, an annual tradition. The 2025 Barkley had officially commenced. And it was a beautiful day for a run. It was sunny with a light breeze. This would fare well for the runners. And also for me. Because next I had to hike to the only spot on the trail that media can observe. the watchtower at the top of the mountain, which is the highest point of the race. Despite the beautiful weather, I struggled.
I think this is my Barkley, and I'm gonna do it. I'm just a podcaster.
It was a 4-mile hike, seemingly straight up the mountain. But finally, I made it.
I've made it to the top of Frozen Head Mountain. I am looking down at what they call Rat's Jaw, which is this very steep hill. And now we're just gonna wait for the Barkers to show. Bless their hearts.
So we waited, and we waited, and no one showed up for hours. Eventually, it was the park's closing time, and we had to get back to camp. Everyone at the top of the hill was disappointed, maybe even a little scared. Was the addition too much? Was it dangerous? As we walked down the hill, everyone kept eyes on the crest above us to see if the first runner might emerge. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And then...
634.
The first runner is a guy named John Kelly. He's a local boy, grew up on the outskirts of the state park. He's a data scientist, founded his own insurance underwriting analytics firm. But he's also one of the biggest names in trail running because he attempts absurd things. Not just the Barkley. In fact, I reached out to him for an interview, and the message I got back was from his crew, because the next day, he was starting his attempt to break the Appalachian Trail record. He was not available for an interview. 2025 was John's 8th go of the Barkley, and because he finished in 2017, 2023, and 24, everyone was watching him, and in this moment, he was leading the pack. As we kept walking down to our car, I talked with the photographer Jacob Zuckerman from Sweden. This is his second year attending the Barkley. The year before, in 2024, he captured an iconic photo that was shared thousands of times. It's an image of the first female finisher ever, collapsing at the Yellow Gate upon her completion of the race. Jacob covers ultras, and he knows this race really well.
That's an exciting 30 seconds.
Yeah, waited all day, and then 30 seconds was all we got. But this is what I like, the longer the race goes, you just like end up in these weird situations and everything just like happens.
I witnessed this as night set in. For hours, there was no activity, and then suddenly runners started appearing to quit. Like Richard Shannon from Zambia.
You're going the wrong way.
I left my sense of humor behind. I've just come to look for it.
As they talked, another runner showed up.
Are you finishing alert?
Heck no, they said.
Laz and Carl chastise each runner when they come in.
Where in the hell have you been?
Book 9. Where the hell did you put it?
They talk at length about all the details of their race. They want to know about each book, how long it took them to find the ones they did or didn't, and what parts of the trail were the hardest. Listen to how long Claire from France spent on the first loop alone.
It took me 2 hours to find book 2, and then 2 hours to find book 3, and 2 hours to find book 5, and when you add up, it takes a lot of time. But
20 hours. Oh.
And then they play taps. Every single time someone quits, they play taps, which means you can hear it all night long. But some runners, they finish the loops with all their pages, regroup, and start back again. And since they're from all over the globe, you'll hear cheers rise up in all languages. And it goes like this for like 3 days until each one quits or fails to make the time cutoff. And in 2025, the Barkley took no prisoners. There wasn't a single finisher of this year's event. So clearly, the Barkley is niche. But what does it offer? What can be learned from something that's so very, very niche? And you might find yourself confused, maybe even incensed. Why would anyone do this? How is this a good idea? And why should I care? I can relate. When I watched the documentary, I was totally turned off, and nothing about it made sense to me until I met the crew of the ship, and most importantly, its captain, our very own Captain Ahab, Lazarus Lake, who finally, at long last, will emerge from his cabin after this break. Hey there, it's me. I know sometimes we like to listen to podcasts passively. Maybe we don't want to go further into their world, and that's totally fine if that's you. But if you're listening to this and you think, gosh, I'd love to know more about what's happening with this show because there's always something happening, you should join the niche list. It's our newsletter, and I send out one of those a month. Actually, I call them niche letters, of course. And it's got updates on everything that's actively happening, but developments on future plans that are coming through. There's always so much going on with this show. So join the niche list. I send one email a month, maybe two if it's super important. Would love to have you. Check the show notes for a link to sign up. Chapter 3, Ahab.
Now, it might seem an absurdly hopeless task to seek out one solitary creature in the unhooped oceans of this planet. But not so did it seem to Ahab, who knew the sets of all tides and currents. God help the old man, whose intense thinking thus makes him a Prometheus. A vulture feeds upon that heart forever. That vulture, the very creature he creates.
What do we learn from the Barkley? What can be learned from something so ridiculous? To answer that question, we first have to determine what we learn from Moby Dick. What do these stories about failure and beginning something we may never finish tell us about ourselves, or encourage us toward and change us? We can't answer any of these questions until we meet our captain, because every ship that sails has its captain. And the Barkley Marathon's captain is no less an enigma than Captain Ahab himself. The Barkley is the brainchild of a legend, an icon, a mysterious being named Gary Cantrell, and he goes by the name Lazarus Lake.
You gotta see the hole where people would go for 30 days at a time if they misbehaved.
The same morning we saw Carl plant the discipline and punishment book at the prison, we got a tour of the facility, and it was led by the owner of the brewery next door. The guide's self-appointed assistant of sorts was Gary Cantrell. Laz, as he's often called, toured this prison for the first time in the 70s, and about a decade later, came up with an ultramarathon that would be run in the hills surrounding it. The early concept of the Barkley was loosely based on the foot chase of the escaped murderer James Earl Ray, who supposedly only made it 12 miles in just under 60 hours. Laz had the thought that 12 miles in 60 hours was pretty pitiful, as he put it, and he thought he could do 100 miles in that same time. And thus, the Barkley unfolded into what it is now. But the Barkley is only part of the ways in which Lazarus Lake captains his ship. Here's biographer Jared Beasley.
But you hang around him long enough, you realize that the man is absolutely insatiably curious about everything. It's hard to get him to talk about the races because he's talking about the alluvial plain, he's talking about a rhinoceros beetle, he's talking about ash borers, pine beetles. It's unbelievable. But definitely a lot of that gets into his races.
He's a race director, or organizer. But some even go so far as to call him an artist, or a genius. Here's Jody Eisner again.
And it's just amazing. Like, he is literally a genius, literally. And what he's done with this, it's just insane that people have just gravitated towards his event. So I guess in that sense, yes, he is an artist, but I guess, yeah, he's an incredible dude.
The genius of Lazarus Lake starts to show in the nuance of all of these races, specifically the precision of construction of the course.
It's easy to create a race course that is impossible. You or I could go do that. But what he's done over the years with this is he's just tweaked it a little bit here and there. Like, this is a fairly big tweak this year. So if nobody finishes this year, then they'll just dial something back next year just to make it, okay, we'll see if we can save them 6 minutes here on this section. Then maybe somebody will be able to do it. And then the next year, no, nobody does it. So it just constantly gets tweaked so it is barely possible.
Wow.
But again, it's easy to create something impossible.
What I hear Jody saying here is that Laz has a character trait that is maybe a little bit more nuanced. It's not on full display like the cigarette that hangs out of his mouth or the walking stick he uses. It's more subtle. It's when he's standing at the gate with his eyes darting between a stopwatch and the trail, eagerly waiting, almost begging a runner to turn the corner to make the cutoff, even though he constantly says things like this.
We're 13 minutes in. There's already people contemplating quitting.
So, when it comes to finding deeper meaning from this suffering, the captain's view is the first place to start. We have to join him on the quarterdeck, his lookout, his perch. For Laz, that's the picnic table next to the fire pit at Barkley headquarters, just after everyone has left the Yellow Gate for the first time.
Okay, can I ask you a few questions?
So my guess is that.
Okay.
All right, for the record, your name, and then what are all of the runs you have organized in your career?
My name is Gary Cantrell. Organized the Strolling Gym in the Vol State, in the heart of the South. Race for the ages. Little Dog's Backyard, Big Dog's Backyard, Idiot's Run. You like to set up events that challenge people.
You go right up.
All of his races have elements of chaos and nonsense. That's kind of their hallmark. The Big's backyards are loops of 4.167 miles completed every hour until there's only one person left. The Strolling Gym is an odd-length 41.2-mile race. And when Lazarus is asked how the Barkley is different from other ultras, he says this.
The Barkley is a big puzzle. It's like a game you play, but your body is the game piece.
And these game pieces, the runners, are solvers of extreme mental and physical puzzles.
One of the finishers from 2004, he was a physicist from Los Alamos, New Mexico. And it took him 5 tries, but something would be an obstacle, and his look at it was, okay, how do I overcome that? How do I solve this problem? How do I solve that problem? See a lot of when they come back and they have failed, as most of them are going to fail. Some of them will fail spectacularly. All they're thinking in their mind is, how do I get past that? Whatever it was that stopped me this time, how do I overcome that?
What he's getting at here is the mental games at play in overcoming resistance, building resiliency against the built-in evolutionary functions that once kept us alive while existing among predators as prey.
Fatigue is not so much physical. It's built into our bodies not to burn up all our energy. Quitting is an adaptation to keep us from pursuing something that's hopeless to the same end, where that you exhaust your resources trying to do something you can't do. It's a uniquely human thing that we can mentally overcome these adaptations because they're just built into our brain. You just have to override it.
Each of his races draw upon this principle in different ways.
The Strolling Gym is one for your strategy, your game planning, execution of your game plan in the game. The backyard is strictly the will to win. And then the Barkley is that the most challenging thing for any athlete, which is uncertainty. They don't know the most vital details until up to the last hour before it actually starts. And so they have to be moving on their feet. They have to be able to take that uncertainty without being flustered or frustrated or overly distressed.
The races are symbols, like the white whale himself for Ahab. The unknowable, cruel, and indifferent forces of the universe are represented in them. The very whiteness of Moby Dick is ominous. It's like a void, a terror, the embodiment of mystery, and these runners, like Ahab, want to fight that. Remember Claire, the runner who spent 20 hours on her first loop? This was her attitude before the race.
And how did you know you were ready for this?
I don't think I am ready, so I am not.
You're doing it, to try it.
To try, yeah, to see what it is and to see if it's something I like and if I have fun or not and if I can do it. Yeah.
These folks are very existential. They ask a lot of big questions about life, about existence. They ponder. And this makes sense because practically they spend a lot of time alone, just them and their thoughts, which means they've got answers for why this crazy undertaking has relevance for them, philosophically. Here's Jody.
And you hear a lot of people saying that ultras, like a 100-mile or whatever, is a lot like life condensed into a day or 36 hours or whatever, because you go through highs and lows and whatever. Everybody's anxious. You're excited to leave the gate, but then you get up there and you're dazed and confused and you're scrambling around. That creates a panic inside. But then you find the book, and then all of a sudden it's like mass excitement, and everybody's happy and high-fiving each other. And then it's just that roller coaster, and it can change so quickly, here especially. So then you take that to the real life, and it's like, oh, hang on, this situation's not so bad at work. It can hit you all of a sudden. You could be really down, and then something amazing happens in life or here in an ultra or whatever, and things turn around. So I think, for me anyways, ultras teach you that life is not so hard at times and that you can get through it, but it's not going to last forever. Neither one.
Okay, so running as a metaphor for life. Sure, we get that, easy. But what about the sarcasm of the Barkley? The joke of it all? The books with their titles, the shell, the playing of taps, these things all seem like thoughtless jokes set up by a maniac or the work of a brilliant artist. Though Laz does not see himself this way, like others do.
I don't know, wouldn't you say that what you see here is an old hillbilly who lives in the woods?
But old hillbillies who live in the woods can be artists, can't they? Do you see what you do as an art?
No, it's human experimentation with voluntary subjects.
But this isn't just mere experimentation for the folly of it all. It's got purpose. Important existential purpose. Melville writes in Moby Dick that there are some times in this strange affair we call life when one might take life itself to be a practical joke. And one might more than suspect that the joke is at nobody's expense but his own. Who among us has not felt like life was nothing but one big joke, mocking us, taunting us? And yet, the Barkley teaches us that in the face of a joke at our expense, we have an invitation to press on anyway. To do the ridiculous, unexpected, perhaps impossible thing because it will make us stronger. But in the case of Ahab, this ridiculous quest doesn't seem wise. He's not a hero or someone we should look up to. He's tormented, he's sad, he's depressed and depressing. He's obsessed. I hate to spoil a good ending, but here goes. His own obsession kills him. This made me uncomfortable as I compared it to the Barkley because this event felt more like a family reunion than it did a whaling ship set for revenge. I talked to Jared about this exact thing. This is a longer clip, but I'm going to play all of it because I think it's really important. Every bit.
There's a freeze frame stuck in my mind of Jody walking up to, I actually don't know his name. Just like they walk up to each other and they gave each other this huge hug. And they were showered, they had already finished by then. And it put a lump in my throat. And I really did cry on the way home. And it felt like I was leaving summer camp. But it's juxtaposed with all of the rhetoric of like discipline and punishment and pushing yourself. And I'd wondered if you had seen that too, what your thoughts are about that, like the human mushiness in the middle of it.
There's something about people that are seeking their limits, that are really going out there and giving everything. It reminds me a little bit of the time that I broke down about myself. Sorry, but I was taking a karate from this grandmaster. There were like 2 or 3 people there holding these punching bags, and you could kick them, you could punch them, and for 90 seconds you go at it with everything that you've got. And then there's that grandmaster over there watching. Because he's watching, you don't want to hold back anything. Anyway, I gave it everything that I had, and my senpai, my older teacher guy that was guiding me, had to basically hold me. Like I couldn't really stand on my own, and escort me back into formation in front of the grandmaster. He asked you what you've gotten out of these 6 months or whatever it had been at that point from the karate, and why are you taking karate? Why are you here? What is it you want to learn? And it wasn't just me. There were so many people that were taking this test that started crying. And you start talking about shit that you didn't think that you'd bring up, like your high school prom or something, you know, all these overarching things of your life, but it just comes out of you, just this emotional release. And I think that there's an element to that with Laz. The races themselves, absolutely, they're critical, and they push you to that limit that 90 seconds is meant to do in karate. Give it everything, don't hold back, just go, go, go. And you're surprised that when you expend all of that energy, what comes out emotionally, you know? Having said that, back to your original question, I think when you realize that about the events and you see these people get to that stage, it's just a wrecking ball. It's hard to put into a category that makes sense in the regular world. Like, why do we need to do that? What are they going to get out of it? What are they going to come away with? But you know that you're witnessing something that's authentic, that they're having an authentic experience. And it's really overwhelming to see.
Melville says that for Ahab, Moby Dick was the monomaniac incarnation of all those malicious agencies which some deep men feel eating in them till they're left living on with half a heart and half a lung. And yet, the Captain Ahab of the White Whale of Tennessee, Lazarus Lake, Gary Cantrell, somehow has managed and cultivated a community that leaves its participants fully hearted and breathing better than before they started, especially if perhaps they have things at home that require a lot of them, like for veterinarian Matt Cantrell.
Veterinary profession has like a relatively high suicide rate. Obviously, like our lives aren't on the line, but like our patients are, and finances come into the picture too. And it's a hard profession to be in. I love my job. I love my profession. I'm passionate about it. But if I were living in that world all the time, I think like it has a tendency for some people to kind of like slip into an unhealthy area. So that's why I do this, because it completely gets me outside of that space and just gives me an outlet.
Laz himself is inspired by the participants of his races. Remember John Kelly, the leader in this year's race, who's currently out on the Appalachian Trail trying to break the record? His third year running the Barkley, he had completed 4 loops. He had about 12 minutes to get to the yellow gate to start his last loop, otherwise he'd be disqualified. And Jared remembers the drama of that moment.
People are helping him. His wife is trying to feed him. He won't eat. He's got this ghostly stare on his face. He looks so empty. And he gets up to the gate, and he starts up the hill there. He makes it about 30 yards, circles, and just lays down.
John laid there for an hour, stood up, dry heaved, and took off into the trees. This was all done in plain sight of the spectators, the whole thing. There was a camera woman there who went looking for Laz. She found him in the U-Haul he rents for the equipment, but sleeps in at night.
And he was wiping underneath his glasses. He said, "I'm sorry. We've just seen someone give everything that they've got, and I've got to compose myself." There is a very, very warm soul underneath there that cares about the human condition, cares about the individual.
Whereas Captain Ahab was, quote, a ray of living light, but without an object to color, Laz is a multi-hued spectrum made up of every color of the rainbow, and he invites others into it. Because also, unlike Ahab, Laz's unceasing strivings toward the conquering of the unconquerable is not rooted in hatred. Ahab's is entirely driven by hate. In one soliloquy of many, he cries out, "For hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee." Ugh, emo bands, take note. Gary Cantrell doesn't manufacture these experiences of misery because of a negative bent toward proving oneself or anger about life being unpredictable. That's what Ahab does. He operates out of rage. Gary builds these experiences for the opposite reason entirely. Acceptance. Acceptance that being undone unpredictably does not have to be the end. He emboldens not just the participants, but others to accept and face adversity on and off the trail.
You want to see people succeed, but you know that for it to have value, most of them won't. And people contact me, even though it surprises me that people see that. People will say, I did such and such, something totally unrelated to running. Said, I watched that, and I see these people. They're the best, and yet they're willing to go into a situation where they'll probably fail. And I thought, why can't I try? You know, they have something they wanted to do, but they're afraid to try for fear of failure. Yeah, I think that's something you need in your life is the willingness to fail. Because if you aren't willing to fail, you can't succeed.
I mentioned earlier that Laz is starting to hand things off to Carl as he's getting older. And Carl's on the same page as Laz is. After this year's race started, someone asked him if folks should be scared of the new section they added to the map, the one that all the runners were nervous about.
I mean, really, it's nothing to be afraid of. Only thing to be afraid of is putting in all of the effort to prepare, and then it goes for a little result. That's a little scary, but it's life. No guarantees.
I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that our niches can provide a safe environment for us to practice this concept too, whether you're physically uncomfortable while doing them or not. Here's Matt again.
You certainly don't have to be a trail runner to strive for physical exertion and stretching yourself. It's not going to appeal to everybody, and it's really kind of a fool's errand for most of us. But there's all sorts of ways that we can stretch ourselves in the real world universally, for sure.
So here's where the Pequod turns into a niche to meet you party boat. Our niche communities give us material that can be used in a way to play out and overcome our real life struggles. Our Warhammer 40,000 series talked with a fitness coach who's witnessed some of the silly battle cries from the game actually giving clients motivation to do that difficult thing, even if the phrase is said sarcastically. Our wild turkey conservationists, who look for the elusive turkey on Saturday mornings at 4 a.m., liken the whole experience to being patient for good things. Stick Nation taught us that paying attention is an antidote to distracting and swirling tumult. Speed puzzling presents opportunity for solving problems. Dog agility teaches persistence. Professional Santas show us how joy in the presence of grief can change us. These things we do to fill our time for fun or for physical and mental health also have the ability to teach us while surrounded by community. Things like resiliency, perseverance, even when faced with failure. Because, like Ahab, we all have our white whale, the thing we're willing to spit our last breath on. But it matters that it be for goodness sake. It all comes down to how we go about chasing it. My name is Leslie Thompson, and I get to create, produce, and report these stories you hear on Niche to Meet You. Our script editor is Chris Thiessen, and this episode was mastered by Kevin Morris. The music you hear under you was written by Abigail Flowers, and this arrangement was produced and performed by Chris Leidecker, Kevin Gift, and Abigail. Additional music was provided by Blue Dot Sessions. I want to offer a personal word of gratitude to all the folks at the Barkley Marathons for welcoming me this year. Laz, Carl, all the runners. It truly was life-changing. Find out more about the show by going to our website at niche2meetyou.show and join our niche list. We send one email a month with updates on all things niche. So if you want to keep in touch between episodes, that's the place to go. Check the show notes for the link. I'm so glad you joined us for this episode. It's been so niche to meet you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, my new niche buddy. There are more episodes waiting for you wherever you're listening to this one right here, right now. So go find them, like our episode about dog agility, or like vintage car radio restoration. There is so much more to be found in the Nicheverse. I'm so glad to have had you with us. Don't be a stranger. We'll see you next time.